Atlantis. Was it a giant continent in the middle of the Atlantic? An alien civilization? The Aztecs? The Irish? Or just a figment of Plato's imagination? These are just a few of the many explanations for Atlantis. But what's the best? We work together to create books about dinosaurs, the ancient world, and mysteries. We love this stuff.
But we don't always agree.
We are... Let's start with some background. The legend of Atlantis isn't exactly a legend. It's not the sort of thing that people would swap stories about back and forth. Instead, we can trace Atlantis back to exactly one person, Plato. Writing around the year 360 BC, Plato tells the story of Atlantis in two of his works, Timaeus and Critias. In those works, he starts off with this elaborate story about how he first learned about the Atlantis legend. Apparently, the famous Athenian lawmaker Solon went to Egypt, where he heard about this from a family of secret priests, then told it to someone who told it to someone who told it to Plato, something like that. But you all know the basics of the Atlantis story. Atlantis, among other things, was a vast continent, supposedly the size of Asia Minor and Libya put together, and it sat beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The great harbor of Atlantis had merchant ships coming from all over the world, and the harbor featured a series of concentric rings with a canal where ships could go to the very center island. And at the center of the continent of Atlantis was a giant mountain. It was also a military power. It controlled its entire continent, as well as surrounding islands, and even some of the mainlands around the Mediterranean. Eventually, of course, the entire island of Atlantis was destroyed. As Plato famously says, but afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea. Everyone from serious archaeologists to maybe more fringe types have suggested all sorts of candidates for Atlantis. And that's what brings us here today. Brian has a theory of Atlantis that, Brian, would you say this is fringe or would you say this is more serious? Is it fun? Is it real? What are we talking about?
My theory, I would say, was fringe for a while, but it's gained a lot of popularity over the past few years, and I'd say it has a lot of credibility for being the real deal. Have either of you ever heard of the Richat Structure?
I had not heard of it until you told me about it for this episode.
Okay. Drew, have you ever heard of this?
Unfortunately, I have not.
Okay. Well, good. Gonna drop some crazy knowledge on you guys. So, this is also called the Eye of the Sahara. From that name, I think you can assume that it's in the Sahara Desert, right? So, more specifically, this is in the country of Mauritania. Contrary to what a lot of people think, Atlantis being under the water, that's where a lot of the more traditional views of Atlantis are. This one is
that's where Aquaman's Atlantis is. Aquaman's Atlantis is underwater.
Yep, it is. But I would say he's wrong, okay? Because it's actually in the middle of the desert. So this is a very remote part of the world. As you can believe, the Sahara Desert is not the most easily traveled place. You're not able to just get around there. It's huge. It's bigger than the United States, right? So this is one little spot in Mauritania. And you can actually see this, though, from if you go on Google Maps, Google Earth, you type in the Eye of the Sahara, it will take you right there and you'll see a picture of it. What is this thing? Besides it possibly being Atlantis, geologists don't really know what it is. There's speculation that it could be like an ancient volcano that created a dome and then collapsed. So they think it could be something along those lines. Initially, people thought it was like a crater from a impact from a meteor or something, but the volcano explanation is a little bit more mainstream now on what it is. But there's nothing else like this in the world that they've discovered. So this is kind of a unique geological phenomena. So that's why they don't really know what it is. I would like to argue that maybe, yes, it could be natural. It could be man-made. Could be kind of a combo of the two of them. We don't know.
So, a question before we go too much farther. As you know, Brian, I usually take the boring mainstream view of things.
Yes.
So, is the boring mainstream view that this is a natural formation?
Yes, I would say most people think it's a natural formation. Even the people who think this is Atlantis, a lot of them think it's a natural formation that the Atlanteans would have just built upon.
Okay.
But me being me, I think maybe it could have been maybe a mixture of both. Little like some geological structures with the help of some human aid to kind of give it a little bit more of the shape that it has.
So now I picture me running to my boring corner and you running to the fun corner. Okay.
Exactly, yes.
The lines are
Yes.
drawn.
Yep. Why do people think this is Atlantis? All right, so first of all, this fits the description of Atlantis nearly perfectly. So as we have all seen pictures of Atlantis, there's the two rings, and then there's the inner circle island. All of them surrounded by water, obviously. And if you look at the structure, it fits that perfectly. It's a big circle, there's two rings, and then there's a center island. All right, all with like dips in there that look like they held water. The description of Atlantis has mountains to the north, which this has. It also says it was surrounded by large rectangular plains, which this also has. There is evidence that this was once closer to the sea. Right now, I think it's about like 500 kilometers from the sea. So it's a bit of a ways from the sea right now, but there is evidence that the sea was once closer to this. I'll get into that a little bit more. There are also descriptions from Plato that describe Atlantis as being made of red and black and white stones. And that's basically what you find in the area are those colored stones. Other descriptions of Atlantis, it says it was flowing with both cold and hot water from natural springs. They have found evidence of in the center island of a natural freshwater spring. There's also some geothermal hot spring in the area, so it could indicate that there was the natural flow of hot and cold water in the area that could have provided fresh water for the people of Atlantis. Also, you think that, hey, this region is a desert, and it's been a desert for a long time. How could people live out in the middle like that?
I was thinking that, yes.
All right. Well, let me give you a little answer to that. So, most scientists now given evidence that the Sahara Desert is actually densely forested. And as you know, as I say in most episodes, I'm a young Earth creationist, but they even would be on the young side as this as early as 5,000 years ago, from their point of view, from the mainstream point of view, that the Sahara Desert was actually like densely forested and jungled. And there was actually rivers that running through it. One of them that they've found is I'm going to butcher this, but it's the Tamanrasset River. They found that actually flows right through this area, so it would stand to reason that there was rivers running through and around the area of Atlantis.
So what was it was initially a forested area?
Yeah,
and that's
pretty much
how the
all the Sahara
civilization...
Desert was forested fairly
Okay.
recently. Yeah.
So it wasn't like how it looks today.
No.
Okay. So that's how they were
And I'll go into some of the reasons why I think it's more deserty now.
Okay.
So I can kind of answer that too.
I was thinking when you're giving this description, how far away is it from the ocean? Because Atlantis seems very connected with the water and with ships and with the Navy in Plato. So how are they able to get all those boats out there?
Yeah, so that was a good question. So right now, I forget if it's 300 or 500 kilometers away from the sea right now. But as I said, there's evidence that the sea used to run up close to it. And there's also within the structure, there's an exit to the south that looks like it would have exited and flowed into the sea, like similar to the description that it flowed into the sea from the south. But also one problem that does come up is that it is pretty high in elevation. I think it's like 1,300 feet in elevation. So one of the explanations for that is tectonic plate movement has pushed it up over time. So it has just gained some elevation, but there is a lot of evidence. One of the biggest things is if you can even see this from Google Maps and you look down, it looks like there's snow kind of all over the ground, but that's actually salt deposits from salt water. So that's in all the the crevices of the circles, and then also surrounding it too, like the plains around it. There's lots of salt from salt water around it, which indicates that there was seas in that area. To further build this point, on why this is Atlantis. So, as I mentioned, there are mountains to the north. And do you know what those mountains are called?
The Atlas Mountains.
The Atlas Mountains. And these mountains are named after the first king of Mauritania. You guessed it, King Atlas himself. And as we know from Greek mythology, Poseidon fathered King Atlas, who was the king of Atlantis. Also, side note, possible pre-flood Nephilim? Question mark.
Another future show preview.
Exactly. The other interesting thing about this is when you think of Atlantis, you think of mass destruction from water, like a tsunami crushing it under the waves, right? Again, on Google Maps, when you are looking this, if you just zoom out a little bit, you'll see an entire runoff of water from a massive destructive event that literally goes right through the middle of the eye of the Sahara and looks like it just completely leveled and destroyed everything in its path. And you can just see how there's ripples. It literally looks like you're looking like at the bottom of the ocean, how there's ripples in the sand. That's what the whole area looks like, and there's just runoff. I'm sure everybody has seen what like runoff looks like after a big storm, and there's like dirt and sand on the side of the road. It looks like that when you zoom out from space. Again, as a creationist, I would say that is evidence of the great flood of Noah being the judgment of God, destroying this area. So I would argue that Atlantis could have been a pre-flood civilization that was completely wiped out by this massive event. But even if you're not on that side, most, or not, I don't know if most, but a lot of mainstream scientists now are seeing evidence of large catastrophe flood events, including this one, which most scientists would agree that there was some kind of large destructive flood tsunami that wiped this area out, because there's so many indications of it. Like I said, the runoff, and also there's a huge runoff of sand from that area into the sea on the west side of Mauritania, where it goes into the sea. And then another indication is Mauritania has historically been known for their large gold deposits. They've even boasted some of the richest people to ever have lived. So one of their earliest kings is rumored to be the richest person to have ever lived. Like in today's money, he would be richer by far than anybody today, all because of their extreme gold deposits. Lastly, like I said, there was a Roman map maker named Pomponius Mela, and he created a map of the habitable world. And it actually, when you look at it, contains this location of Africa, and it is called Atlantia, right in that location.
You mentioned earlier that the boring common wisdom is that this formation is natural. What are the reasons to believe that at least part of it is man-made?
I would say because there's no other structures like this found in the world. They haven't found any other geological structures that I've been able to see records of in any of the studies I've done. Nobody else is. When I've looked into this, everybody's like, this is kind of a unique geological structure, which to me kind of indicates that there's at least some kind of that there could be some kind of human interaction with the land that kind of help form it and sculpt it into what it looks like today. It could have been in like the rough shape of what it is, but maybe had some kind of help to make it look the way it does.
Do they know what happened to the civilization?
So the prevailing theory is that it got completely just like leveled and destroyed in the flooding event. So it would have gotten like the city itself would have gotten still wiped out into the sea, and the debris of it most likely is scattered kind of throughout like that desert part of the Sahara into the sea. There are a few things that are in the area that do look like they could be man-made, where there's like some rectangular and square structures in that area that look like they could be ancient structures. But again, it's a very difficult place to get to, so there hasn't actually been much archaeological like digging or anything out there, because again, this isn't like the mainstream place to go look for Atlantis either, so I don't think they're like getting funding to go out there.
Related question, have they found any other evidence of human civilization in the area?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's been great civilizations throughout Mauritania for centuries. Like I said, there's like documentation of like the first King Atlas. There's been lots of civilizations just throughout the Sahara in general that they're discovering more and more. The deeper they're able to get into the Sahara, it's more than just Egypt, it's all throughout that region. And again, like there are some scholars who have a hunch that it could be similar to like the Amazon, where things are kind of hiding in plain sight because it was so densely forested and jungled. It could have been like, the Mayas and the Incas that were just all over the Amazon, but we didn't know it until we were able to get above and do the LiDAR, but it's like buried deep under the sand. So it's harder to see that even, but
Yeah, and that's the part of it that I do find really compelling. It's just the thought that if we assume, and I do think there is some decent evidence to back this up, that in prior centuries, prior millennia, that the Sahara was much more habitable, that there could be ancient civilizations there that are just hidden now underneath the sand.
Yeah.
So related to that, then, the folks who subscribe to your theory, are they saying that the ancient Mauritanians were the Atlanteans, or are they positing some sort of more ancient people that came before the Mauritanians?
I would say that they are saying that the ancient Mauritanians are the Atlanteans. I base that mostly on like them claiming King Atlas as the first king of Mauritania and claiming them to be the king of Atlantis. The other big thing with Atlantis is it being a continent. In the mainstream world, Africa was divided into different sections by like large lakes and through the sea. So it was actually like this section was actually an island. What mainstream would say would be like 10 million years ago. What I would say would be possibly pre-flood. This could have been an own island. So maybe that would also give it credence to being like a continent.
All right, so they agree that this area used to be an island, but it would have been far further back in the past than this would. Okay.
Yep. And I'm making the argument maybe it could have been pre-flood. So then that timeline would line up again. But that's me speculating. So
All right. Atlantis in the Sahara has a good ring to it.
Right?
That is interesting.
I'm glad you think so, Drew.
And there you have it. 3 of our favorite suggestions for what Atlantis may have been, what may have inspired Plato. If you have maybe your own favorite candidate, either one that you actually think is plausible or one that you just think is fun, please let us know in the comments. Or if any of us missed anything, if you think one of us left a good argument for our side on the table, or if we got something wrong, let us know in the comments as well. If you want to watch a similar video that we've done, one about arguing over ancient civilizations and cool giant superstructures, why not check out our video on the supposed Bosnian super pyramid?
Also, carrying over the tradition from our last video about Nessie, let's make this another competition. You guys can tell us in the comments whose theory you think is best, and maybe we can tally up the points.
And as always, don't forget to boop that like button and subscribe.